So glad you're with us on Wells of Wealth. Brad Johansen along with Don Chamberlain, the CEO, and DC Chamberlin, the Chief Financial Planning Officer of Chamberlin Group. We are glad you're with us. Gentlemen, it is always a pleasure. How are we today?
Doing great.
So glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
You're ready to dip in again.
Ready to do it, yep.
We talk about our no-fee mini plan. This is kind of the tail end of that, the
Yep.
Wells of Wealth report that we're going to go into. You have all been on this climb. Let's get up to the top of the mountain. And for a lot of you, you probably have advisors who have helped you on that climb. They've been very good at accumulation. We're going to strategize for you today on this climb down the mountain. It is distribution. It is decumulation. You've now got to figure out how to pay yourself. How do we do that in the Wells of Wealth? Let's begin that topic when we talk about this transition, because this is significant. Is it fair to say, Don, that a lot of people don't realize that they're transitioning and how they've been doing it for 3, maybe 4 decades to have to do it a little bit differently now?
I'd say that's super fair, Brad.
No.
Because I don't have any idea,
I
right?
appreciate that.
So because they're used to doing it a certain way. They're used to saving. Their employer's going to match their 401k. They're going to save some extra money somewhere else. And they're moving up the mountain, right? It's like the retirement mountain. So what is the biggest mountain in the world?
Is it Everest?
Mount Everest, yeah.
It still is? I questioned myself.
So throughout the 20th century,
okay.
people were constantly trying, because it's the biggest mountain in the world. We got to get to the top. Whoever gets to the top is going to be some kind of hero, right? So that's happening throughout the whole 20th century, and many people made it to the top. They just couldn't get down. You know why? On the way down, they lost oxygen, they ran out of food, they ran into weather. And in 1953, there was a guy named Sir Edmund Hillary.
I remember
Have you heard
Edmund.
this story before? Okay.
Yeah, we were tight.
So here's a picture of what he did. Is he went out there beforehand in Nepal, instead of just like being some European guy that thought he knew what he was doing, he went to an expert. These were people that knew the land, the landscape, the environment, the weather, and that person was called a Sherpa.
Found the Sherpa.
And the Sherpa led him up the mountain and led him down the mountain. And at that time, in 1953, he and his group became the most famous people in the world, because they not only could go up the mountain like retirement, but they had someone to lead them down the mountain too, to get to their success level. And everything changes when you start to retire. You have to take money out. Now you got to pay taxes. You got to figure out Social Security. You got to figure out Medicare. And you've never done that before. And many advisors have never done that before, believe it or not. They're used to accumulating, like you said, Brad, but they don't know this other direction. And we're going to talk about that today and how to get you there.
All right, how do you get ready? Am I ready? How do I know I'm ready? Well, conveniently, Don has put together yet another tool to try and help you figure out, are you ready? ForReadyQuiz.com. You can scan the QR code that's on your screen. What questions should I ask? Already been prepared for you. Very simple. When we talk about educators first, this is what Don and this team are doing. How do we help you understand where you are so that you know where you're going? ForReadyQuiz.com, scan that QR code, leave it up for a minute. Sequence of returns probably is a huge risk in the idea when I say that this is all we've been doing. You put it in the market, you set it, you forget it, you let it go. That's what we were told to do. And then I say, you know what? This is the date I'm going to retire, and I'm leaving it all in the market. Give me an idea, sequence of returns, how that can be dangerous for me, or what I need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and when we think about decumulation and the risks in decumulation, this is one of the biggest risks that people are going to face, is sequence of returns risk. And it really starts with this math of loss. And we have a good example to put up for this to help better explain what the math of loss is. But essentially, if you had a starting balance of $1 million and the market drops 30%, you have $700,000 left over. Now, if you think you're only going to need that 30% recovery to get back to even, that's not the case. You actually need 43% to get back to even, because 30% on 700,000 is only $210,000 of recovery. So think about this. If this happens and then you're compounding this math of loss by taking money out, you are whittling away your money at a much faster rate and setting yourself on a decumulation path that could be riddled with issues down the road. So really important to kind of look at this and think about this and have a good strategy designed to account for this.
Traditional thinking said, and I guess for decades, traditional thinking would tell us, you leave it in the market, you just hit a number, and then you take out a certain percentage, and you're going to be good for the rest of your life. Is traditional thinking flawed?
Well, there's the 4% rule. I think that's what you're referring to. So it is flawed because the 4% rule doesn't work if you have a 2008 and everything goes to pot right when you retire, or a 2000 to 2002 when the market went down 49% in 3 years. And over that 3-year period, you can't stop taking your income. So you're decumulating the same time the market. In the past, we were putting money in systematically when the market was down and buying more shares. That's called dollar cost averaging. Now you're dollar cost decumulating, and you can run out of money much, much quicker. We've seen people running out of money in their early 80s in different scenarios that we've seen. If we run it against, say, if they retired in 2000 through today, they're running out in a short period of time. So this is something that you want to watch. And that's why the Wells of Wealth is awesome, because it puts your assets into different income places and positions them so that you can take the income at different times when the economy's changing. And it lets you control what you're doing, not the economy, not the market, not the government with taxes.
It is putting together the Wells for you at the end of the no-fee mini plan. We have done the programs. Hopefully you've been staying with us, but sometimes your schedule gets tight. I hope you're recording this so that you can go back and find out that we've talked about Social Security. We've talked about your tax plan. And we're talking about your Wells of Wealth, which is the title of the book that Don has put together over 30 years and plus of doing all of this. How do I get a copy, you ask? Call the number on your screen. Talk to a retirement specialist on all of this. This is, how do we put it together so that it's easy for you? How about a 20-minute call? You call the number and you ask them, can I have a copy of this book? And can I ask a few more questions to see if my Wells of Wealth are going to work? This is your time to work through that. And how do we understand it in the best way that we possibly can? Call the number on your screen. Let's do it for you. We'll finish on more of the Wells of Wealth when we return.
The history of my family is kind of interesting because my great-grandfather, he had a horse cart, basically a 2-story building, like it wasn't a factory or anything, and they would hand make these horse carts. The lumberyard owner came to him and said, I'm having a hard time getting my boat up to northern Michigan. And he said, well, why don't we try attaching a Model T to your cart that's pulling your boat? And instead of it taking a week, it took like a day and a half to get the boat up there. He said, you know what, I'm gonna call this a semi-truck. So whenever we say the word semi today, that came from my great-grandfather, and that company became quite successful. What ended up happening was we ran into this thing that was called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. One generation starts, that's my great-grandfather's generation, they innovate, they build something. The next generation is usually hard workers and they continue it. By the 3rd generation, though, they're not necessarily going to work as hard. They spend through the money, and unfortunately, that's what happened in my dad's generation. I was told that I had a trust, but by the time I got out of college, there was no money in the trust. I had to put myself in a position where I figured my own future out financially. Years we were behind on bills, was the lights gonna get cut off or the water gonna get cut off? I said, I don't want that to happen to any other family like it happened to us. I want people to perpetuate their legacies. I don't want them to be freaked out if the market goes down or there's some bad economic news. I want them to have a plan so that as they're looking into retirement, they're confident that they have a solution if one of these things comes along.
So glad you're with us on the Wells of Wealth. Brad Johansen with Don and DC Chamberlin. The Chamberlin Group has kind of put together a proprietary group, a process that helps with this decumulation idea and the dangers that go along with it. I will constantly tell you what tools you have, because the more tools that you have in your toolbox, the better for you. So this is, how much risk am I actually taking? And is it measured the way that my portfolio says that it is? 4risk.com, 4riskquiz.com is your spot. You can scan the QR code or go to 4riskquiz.com in the website. When we start to look at this, there's a philosophy behind this whole Wells of Wealth system that you stand on. What's the philosophy? Lead me on the foundation of this.
Well, it's a concept called time segmentation of money. So you're setting up 3 different wells in order to segment your money into time frames. So the first well is a liquid well. This is where you want to have usually $50,000. It could be more based on what your family feels like doing. We had a client that called in and said, I had a terrible car accident. I wrecked my car. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, do I have money to handle this? And he thought, you know what, I do, because I have money in my liquid well, right? So that's what that's for. It's not going to get a great rate of return, but it's there, accessible. The conservative well is where we set up 10 years worth of income. So this well, we don't want it to move a lot. We want it to be a place where your assets are stable, so that when you're taking money out, if the market's going down, like DC showed in the last segment with the math of loss, it's not going to go down. You're avoiding that sequence of returns, that math of loss, by having this set up properly. And it's different for everybody based on what your lifestyle is. And then the growth well, this is where you put the majority of your money, because this is where you're actually going to have a chance to outpace inflation better. This is usually in the market. And this is for long-term growth over 10 years. So we bought ourselves a 10-year time frame by putting that money in the conservative well, where if the growth well does go down, we have a chance for it to come back over that 10-year time frame that we set up for your income for the first 10 years.
DC, give me an example, because everybody wants to say, well, how does that relate to me? Give me an example how this changes a client in their investing and decumulation strategies now.
Yeah, and I'll actually come back to something pretty basic. It's a basic principle of you always want to buy low and sell high. So if you're taking money out in retirement, we don't get to pick when the market goes up or down. When it's going down, we still have to take that money out. So the idea here is that if we have that growth well, we don't have to sell low, right? We can buy low and sell high. We can let it grow. But in that conservative well, we have money that is not subject to the same volatility as the growth well. So that keeps us disciplined. We can take our income. We don't have to really be concerned about using that growth well tomorrow or the next day. It's for 10 years from now. So the volatility of the markets can persist as it does, and we can benefit from the longer term growth like we were when we had our money in our 401k and we were thinking about retirement.
Everything's interactive.
Right.
So I mentioned this at the beginning, that this is part of the no-fee mini plan, where we talk about Social Security. So how did the Wells of Wealth, at the tail end of what we're talking about, deal with or interact with or have impact on both Social Security and taxes when I'm putting together this holistic plan?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. So we usually start with Social Security, and that was the first part of the no-fee mini plan, is getting a Social Security maximization report. Then we talked about the tax and portfolio audit. Today we're talking about the Wells of Wealth report. So when you're selecting how you do Social Security, that's something that then leads into how much money we need to put into the conservative bucket. So what we do is we take your expenses, we help you calculate that, then we subtract what your other guaranteed income is, like Social Security, once you've made that decision, and a pension if you have it. Most people don't, 18% of the people still do. They're grateful for that. Then we have what's called the income gap. And so what we're doing is we're figuring out your income gap. We're putting that amount of assets into your conservative well so that we can draw that down over the 10-year period, and your income should then be secure for that 10-year period.
The interesting part of this is that it all interacts with one another. And I think when we start to put together a holistic plan and say, how do we figure this out? This again is different than what we were told for 40 years on the growth. This is not a set it and forget it plan. This becomes kind of, and I think you've talked about it, this is a living, breathing plan that we have to adjust because there are going to be more what ifs in the retirement than there were on the climb.
Yeah, and it's different for every person that we encounter too. It's one of those things where there's different implementations of this time segmentation strategy. If you want to be more conservative, you draw down that conservative well, right, over that period of time. If you want to be a little bit more aggressive, what you do is when the market's growing up, we take from the growth well, and the conservative well is that buffer for the bad times. So really it's different along the way for each person, and we always have to think about making sure there's enough in that conservative well for each person to cover the time frame that is comfortable for them to have covered.
And part of that is using these tools that are available. Hopefully you've scanned the QR code, taken the risk quiz. How much risk am I taking? Am I in the spot where I need to be? Has my advisor put it in that fits with the way that I want my money to grow or how I want to make sure that I have safe money? All of this becomes part of your holistic plan, and a lot of that is within this book. I'd like a user's guide. This is yours. Don has put this together over decades of putting these together to say, I figured it out, the things that you need to know. Would you like a copy? Call the number on your screen. A retirement educator is at the end of this line. I'd like a 20-minute call to say I have a few questions. And when you talk to that retirement educator, you're asking for this book. I need the user's guide. And I'd also like an appointment to see if I can go through this. All of this is a no-fee mini plan to get an understanding of where you are and how you're going to use your wealth to make it last for the rest of your life. Do that now. Do it for yourself. Make the call. Ask for the book. We'll close up the conversation on the wells when we come back.
We all relate to the Toys R Us jingle, we don't want to grow up and deal with the complexities of taxes and risk. But a lack of financial literacy is costing Americans over $240 billion a year. The system is rigged against the uninformed retiree. The biggest mistake one can make is to keep the same advisor who helped save the money to help you spend it. Most advisors are trained in the accumulation phase, growing your pile. But the decumulation phase requires a totally different skill set, coordinating all 7 pillars of your holistic life plan. Take action today by asking your current advisor these 5 questions. First, what is your experience with the decumulation phase? Can your firm provide forward-looking tax planning? Are you a National Social Security advisor certified by the NSSA? What financial products are you not licensed to offer? How exactly are you compensated? Fees, commissions, or both?
He's always closer than you think. Want to remove Uncle Sam from your retirement?
So glad you're with us on Wells of Wealth. Brad Johansen, Don Chamberlain, DC Chamberlin with the Chamberlin Group, and we're going through the whole no-fee mini plan. We've gotten through Social Security and taxes. Now we're working on the Wells of Wealth. When I talk about this, it's a system. How does the system interact with the other pillars of what we're calling a holistic plan? How does that work?
Well, what we did related to this, Brad, was we went out and really looked at all the areas over many years that people would have to deal with in their retirement. And so we put together what we call the 7 pillars of holistic planning. And what I found, because I was in the securities industry for 17 years before I started this firm in 2002, is that there's a lot of things on here that I couldn't do. They would, if you look at the average statement from a bank or a brokerage firm, it says, we do not give tax or legal advice. We started with taxes, right? We have 2 enrolled agents that are accountants that do taxes in our firm. We've been doing that since 2003. So that's the most important part, we feel, because everybody's going to have to pay a lot of taxes in retirement if they have IRAs and 401ks. Then legacy planning is important. We have that lined up for you. Your investments, how are you going to manage that differently in retirement than you did when you were accumulating your money? Do you have the right insurances in place? Then income planning is critical. We're the first generations here, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, that have to replace that pension. Our parents had pensions before, right? Social Security is a one-time decision. You can't always go back and change it, especially once you get after age 70. You can't change it at all. And then healthcare and Medicare, you're not going to find hardly any advisors talking about that, but we have a specialist on our team. If someone retires before 65, what do they do about healthcare? They're not at Medicare age yet, right? And when they get to Medicare age, hey, I'm about to be 65 soon, but 5 years ago they were sending me stuff on Medicare.
Heck yeah.
Right? And so this is, I'm getting all this stuff and I don't have any idea which company is which. We go through that with you too, because it all interrelates. Other than that, if you want to go to 7 different people and get your advice, it makes it much more complicated. We bring it into one place. We feel like it makes it much more synergistic for you and your family.
So it's a Wells of Wealth report. What's it actually look like for a prospective client, DC?
Yeah, so the no-fee mini plan, the idea behind it, and if we can pull that up on the screen, you can kind of see it's the idea of looking at all these areas and kind of doing a glance at the areas that really can add the value. So some of the areas just to start with, and there's a lot more as you see on the holistic wheel, but the basic ones that we really need to look at are the Social Security maximization report to understand claiming strategies, the tax and portfolio audit to look at the current tax plan and the current portfolio and make sure that there aren't any things that are missing there. And then the Wells of Wealth report, where we kind of look at those 3 wells and make sure there's a true time segmentation of money approach in place. A good holistic plan is really only as good as like the weakest link in that plan. And another way of thinking about it is like you could have a plan that has a squeaky wheel in one of these areas and still be all right, but do you want to miss out on some value that could be added over time is the real question.
Yeah, very quickly, I want to talk about inflation and health. You mentioned healthcare a little bit. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. Inflation is real.
Right.
How do you take that into account in this report as well?
Well, we estimate what the inflation rate is going to be going forward, right? The Social Security Administration says for Social Security it should be 2.5%. I don't know how they know that. We had a high inflation period a few years ago where we hit upwards of 9% in inflation for a year. You have to definitely take that into account, especially with the amount of debt that we have in this country for the federal government, because that could cause much higher inflation in the future. So we estimate that in the plan as part of your income, as part of your Social Security, so that we can try and be ahead of it. There's no perfect answer, but having a plan in place, that's really what's the most important thing. Because if you don't have a plan, somebody else has a plan for you. The people on Wall Street have a plan for you when the market goes down. The IRS has a plan for you when they raise taxes on you, or when your Medicare premiums go up. They have all kinds of plans for you. If you have a plan in place, you're ready for this. And the best example I have is 2022. The market went down 18%. You know how many people called concerned to our office? They didn't, because they had the Wells of Wealth in place. They had their conservative well set up so that they knew that they basically had that taken care of, right? Kind of a little bit of a safety net because this market went down.
Yeah, I'm telling people to call the number on your screen, and I always say call because you're reaching a retirement educator. DC, why is a retirement educator on the other end of the line so significant in this process?
The biggest thing is understanding each person and their unique needs and which planner to match them up with. We have a pretty diverse team of experts and again, like more complex planning, we have more complex planners that can handle more complex plans. So really each person, we can answer some basic questions. We can see if there's a fit there for us to dive deeper in and which plans or which reports are important and how to kind of coordinate all of that. It's a really essential part of this whole thing.
So putting the whole thing together is a process. Well, shoot, you're about 4 decades into this, right? Of putting this whole thing
I
together.
think it's only 39 years, but we're really close.
You're close to 4 decades of putting this. Would you like somebody who's been doing it for 4 decades to do the surgery on you, or would you like the kid coming out of high school who thinks he wants to go into med school to put this whole thing together for you? I want the expert. This is all enclosed here within this. You need somebody who is going to take you through this whole process. That's why we do the process, that there are so many factors within this. You call the number on your screen, you reach that retirement educator to say, what specialization would you like? How do we finish this up for you? Finish it up the right way for you. You've accumulated this for a long time. Now you'd like to make sure it lasts until your last breath. It's your wells of wealth. Let's use it the way you want to do it. Call the experts who've been doing it for decades, hundreds, thousands of times. They're yours. Make the call right now. Use your time wisely. Thanks for being with us. We'll be right back here next time on The Wells of Wealth.